begin tonight with breaking news. A deadly brawl between rival gangs escalating into a fierce gun battle. At least 9 people are dead.
Across the Arizona desert, more than 300 cartel operatives met their demise in a conflict few officials would publicly acknowledge. It didn't begin with a declaration of war. It started with a single brutal incident that sparked weeks of retaliation. Safe houses burned, convoys vanished. Entire crews were wiped out overnight. This wasn't a government crackdown. It was the Hells Angels stepping into cartel territory. How did a motorcycle club inflict that level of damage? And why did authorities remain so eerily silent as the bodies piled up? The desert where 2 worlds collided. On the western side of Arizona, the desert turns into a wide, empty floor of rock and sand. For years, people have passed stories around about that same stretch of desert. In those stories, a long line of cartel trucks rolls north in the dark, and a group of bikers in patched vests waits in the sand. The tale says hundreds of cartel gunmen fall that night. The bikers melt into nearby tribal land, and the government keeps quiet. The details change from one storyteller to the next, but the shape is the same. A secret desert war that no one in power will admit to.
The same story tried to sell me, but the reality is much dirtier.
Whether that big showdown happened or not, the legend did not grow out of thin air. The land itself invites it. It is hard to patrol, full of blind spots, and already used by smugglers who move people and drugs through it every single week. To understand why a bikers versus cartel war could have happened, you have to see what really moves through that desert, and who. West of Tucson, Highway 85 runs down toward a tiny border crossing at Lukeville. On the United States side sits Organ Pipe Cactus National Monument, a park that is both beautiful and dangerous. On the Mexico side sits the town of Sonoita, and a little farther south the town of Altar. For years, human rights groups and reporters have described this whole area as part of a busy smuggling path. By around the year 2000, hundreds of people a day and hundreds of thousands of pounds of drugs were moving through parts of Organ Pipe. The land makes that possible. The Sonoran desert here is rough, hot, and open. There are long stretches with no houses, only saguaros, mesquite, and thorny brush. Dry washes act like hidden roads. Old ranch tracks and fence lines run between cattle gates. At midday, the heat can push well over 100 degrees. At night, it can drop close to freezing. That mix of distance, cover, and harsh weather makes it hard for agents to watch every mile, and easy for smugglers to test and dodge ground sensors and camera towers. Across the line in Sonora, the Sinaloa cartel has deep roots. Investigations and court cases have described Sonora as one of the states where Sinaloa and its allies move drugs and people toward the United States border. From there, crews tied to Sinaloa and other groups run load vehicles that cross the line or pick up cargo inside the United States. Into this smuggling corridor comes the other side of the legend, the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. The first Hells Angels charter was formed in California in the late 1940s. When small groups of riders, many of them war veterans, started their own outlaw clubs in the Fontana and San Bernardino area. Over the next few decades, the Hells Angels spread from that small corner of California into a large network of charters across the United States, Canada, Europe, and parts of South America and Australia. From the start, the club built a strong image. Members ride heavy bikes, wear leather or denim vests, and carry a red and white winged skull logo on their backs. A full member is often called a full patch because of that back patch. Riders also wear smaller patches that mark rank, role, or past events, though the exact meaning is usually known only inside the club. The look is not just style. It is a uniform that signals pride, threat, and loyalty all at once. Police and government agencies in several countries describe the Hells Angels not as a simple riding club, but as an outlaw motorcycle gang and a serious criminal group. United States immigration authorities and other law enforcement bodies list them as a transnational organized crime group, noting that different charters and members have been tied in court cases to drug dealing, especially meth, as well as gun offenses, assaults, and extortion. Members often reject that label and call the club a brotherhood, but the official view is that this is a group that can and does use violence. Inside the club, life is highly structured. Each charter has officers such as a president and vice president, a treasurer, and a sergeant-at-arms who helps enforce internal rules. Newcomers start as hang-arounds, then prospects, and only after a long test can they become full members. Rules can be strict, with fines or beatings for members who talk too much, bring police attention, or fail to back up a brother in a fight. Loyalty and the promise of retaliation are a big part of what holds the group together. Cartel scouts climb hills or sit in parked cars with radios. They watch border patrol units, note when a sensor is tripped, and guide drivers around known checkpoints. Night vision gear, off-road trucks, and cheap drones have all shown up in cases tied to this corridor. Farther east and north, another key piece of land comes into play: the Tohono O'odham Nation. This tribal nation has dozens of miles of border running through its reservation. For decades, smugglers have cut across that land because it is wide, sparsely populated, and crisscrossed by old dirt roads and dry creek beds. In this smuggling highway, people move through it in the dark, sometimes with children, sometimes tied to gangs they barely know. Drug loads move on foot and in hidden compartments inside pickup trucks. Rip crews prowl the same land, looking to rob other smugglers at gunpoint. Ranchers have found dead bodies on their property and burned out vehicles in their washes. Border agents have been shot at and even killed in these same canyons and arroyos. This place always felt like a war zone before a biker battle. The Hells Angels are also not strangers to the desert. The club has had a presence in the American Southwest for years, including charters in Arizona cities such as Phoenix and in other nearby states. In 2002, a famous clash between Hells Angels and the rival Mongols Motorcycle Club inside a Nevada casino left 3 men dead and many more wounded. The fight spilled across the casino floor, with witnesses reporting gunfire near slot machines. Both clubs came armed. Then comes the drug side of the story. The modern drug chain into the United States has several layers. Large cartels in Mexico, like Sinaloa, oversee much of the production of heroin, meth, and now fentanyl and counterfeit pills. And they control many of the main routes into border states such as Arizona. Once those drugs cross the line, other groups take over. There are wholesalers, prison gangs, street gangs, and in some places outlaw motorcycle clubs that handle moving, cutting, and selling the product at lower levels. Sinaloa, in particular, has been singled out by the United States Drug Enforcement Administration as one of the main suppliers of fentanyl and meth into the country. Fentanyl is a lab-made pain drug that is far stronger than heroin. It was meant for tiny medical doses, but is now pressed into fake pills and mixed into street powders. Many users never know it is there. When the dose is even a little too high, breathing can stop in minutes. The toll has been massive. In 2022, synthetic opioids like fentanyl killed more than 70,000 people in the United States. Those deaths made up roughly 2/3 of all overdose deaths that year. Police, health workers, and families talk about losing sons, daughters, and friends in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, often after just one bad batch. Some overdose victims are Hells Angels members and supporters. Some have bikers in their families. That kind of loss creates real anger at the cartels that make the product and the networks that ship it north. That desert sets the stage, but the real clashes don't start out there. They start in the drug trade itself. Inside the biker-cartel drug trade. In the small city of SeaTac, Washington, near the airport, federal agents raided what looked like a normal rental house. Inside, they found fentanyl pills, meth, heroin, and guns, all connected to Sinaloa cartel operations. This is how cartels work inside the United States. The people who run this trade want to blend into normal life. They want money and control, not a big shootout that brings every federal agent in the country down on their heads. Mexican groups like the Sinaloa Cartel and the Jalisco New Generation Cartel control much of the wholesale drug supply inside the United States. They move cocaine, heroin, meth, and fentanyl across the border, then handed off to trusted people who break it down into smaller loads for cities and towns. A big part of this work happens in stash houses, which are normal-looking homes, garages, or storage units used to hold drugs and cash for a short time before they move again. In 2019, federal agents in Los Angeles arrested members of a Sinaloa distribution cell operating from a San Fernando Valley warehouse. They seized 1.3 million fake oxycodone pills laced with fentanyl, one of the largest fentanyl busts in California history. Major cities in the Southwest and on the West Coast work as hubs in this system. Investigators have described places like Los Angeles as giant breakup points for cartel shipments, where loads from Mexico are stored in warehouses and storage units, then split into smaller batches and pushed out along freeways to the rest of the country. From there, the drugs move to Chicago, Atlanta, the Midwest, and small towns that never appear on a map of cartel turf, even though the product has cartel fingerprints all over it. Because federal law and federal prison time are a constant threat, cartel bosses do not like loud gun battles on United States soil. Open fights with long guns on highways or in suburbs risk bringing massive federal heat, so most of the brutal work stays on the Mexican side, where they kidnap, torture, and leave messages on bridges. Inside the United States, they lean more on threats, quiet hits, and fear built through small, controlled acts of violence. Their power here depends less on public terror and more on strong business links and the sense that they can reach anyone who owes them money. For decades, biker clubs made a lot of money from meth. Before Mexican super labs took over, small mom-and-pop labs inside the United States, including some linked to bikers, cooked meth in houses, trailers, and barns. Now the DEA says most of the meth on United States streets comes from large labs in Mexico. That shift changed the balance of power. Many biker clubs no longer control the factories. They have to deal with suppliers who sit much closer to the border and much closer to Mexico. Because of that, the link between a biker patch and a cartel flag can look very different from place to place. In some regions, biker members or trusted friends act as regional distributors for Mexican suppliers. They buy large amounts of meth or fentanyl, then move it down to smaller dealers inside their own world of bars, clubhouses, and local hangouts. In other places, biker crews share the same streets with cartel-backed street gangs but do not work directly with them. Both sides chase the same buyers, watch the same stash houses, and try to lean on the same small-town dealers. That overlap is where trouble starts. When a box of pills goes missing, when someone steals a load, when a dealer owes money, it does not always turn into a huge desert battle. Most of the time, it turns into a beating in a parking lot, a drive-by shooting, a man dragged into a car, or a body in a ditch. To understand what biker patches bring to this mix, it helps to look at how far their own violence has gone even when cartels were not part of the story. In the year 2015, a meeting between rival biker clubs at a Twin Peaks restaurant in Waco, Texas, turned into a burst of gunfire that left 9 people dead and around 20 injured in a matter of minutes. Police recovered dozens of guns. The parking lot looked like a crime scene from a war zone. Both clubs had come armed. Security footage later showed bikers pulling guns within seconds of the first confrontation starting. In Canada, the Quebec biker war between the Hells Angels and a rival club called Rock Machine ran from the mid-1990s into the early 2000s. Over those years, more than 160 people were killed, including bystanders and an 11-year-old boy hit by a car bomb outside a club hangout. Bombings, street shootings, and ambushes turned parts of Quebec into a real battleground, all driven by a struggle over who would control the local drug market. Cases like Waco and Quebec show that outlaw motorcycle clubs are absolutely capable of deadly, sustained violence when they feel their power, money, or honor are on the line. Even with all that violence, this is still only the ground-level view of a much larger fight. The real war on cartels. In one fiscal year, the Coast Guard cutter Monroe seized over 500,000 pounds of cocaine, hunting cartel boats in the Pacific. That is the scale at which cartels operate. The rumor about a biker war in the Arizona desert only points to a tiny slice of that picture. The real fight with cartels runs far past the dry borderline, out over warm oceans, up jungle rivers, through busy ports, and into control rooms where people stare at glowing maps and try to stop drug loads long before they ever reach the United States. Follow a single shipment from the south. On a river that feeds the Pacific Ocean, workers load bricks of cocaine into a shed and then into a camouflaged boat. Sometimes that boat is a skinny go-fast made from fiberglass with several huge engines bolted to the back. Sometimes it is what the Coast Guard calls a low-profile vessel, a homemade craft that sits so low in the water that only a small cabin and exhaust pipes show above the waves. Both types have one job. They race north in the dark, far-off normal shipping lanes and count on the size of the ocean to hide them until they can pass their load to the next link in the chain. For years, the United States and many partner nations have worked to break that chain at sea. In the Eastern Pacific and the Caribbean, they run joint patrols aimed at catching these boats before the drugs reach Mexico, Central America, or United States shores. Much of that work falls to the Coast Guard's largest ships, known as national security cutters. These 418-foot ships can stay out for months at a time, carry a helicopter and drones, and launch small boats packed with armed boarding teams. In one recent Pacific campaign, a task group built around the cutter Monroe helped seize more than 500,000 pounds of cocaine and other drugs in a single fiscal year. This was part of wider sea efforts where total seizures have reached hundreds of thousands of pounds in some years and cost cartels billions of dollars in lost product. Every big seizure starts as a tiny mark on a screen. In Key West, Florida, Joint Interagency Task Force South runs a large operations room with maps of the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific on the wall. Navy, Coast Guard, drug agents, federal investigators, and foreign officers sit side by side, sharing radar, satellite pictures, and tips. The task force says it has helped stop more than 1,000 drug boats and planes, led to thousands of arrests, and taken drug loads worth around $190 billion from cartels. Analysts study past routes, use computer tools to spot strange tracks, and then tell nearby cutters and patrol planes where to turn and what to chase. A typical craft can carry roughly 3 tons of cocaine with only a few crew members squeezed beside fuel tanks. When they are cornered, smugglers try to open valves and sink the boat so the drugs are harder to use as evidence. In campaigns like Colombia's Operation Orion, dozens of countries have sent ships, planes, and police units that together seized well over 200 tons of cocaine in a single push. When you step back and look at that sea hunt, it starts to feel like a war that no one is fully willing to call a war. As this quiet sea fight has grown, the political pressure around it has grown too. For years, some lawmakers in the United States argued that major cartels should be treated like foreign terror groups, pointing to mass killings in Mexico and overdose deaths in American towns. That push has now turned into action. The United States government has begun to use its Foreign Terrorist Organization label on some of the strongest cartels, including the Sinaloa cartel. The label makes it easier to freeze money, charge anyone who gives material support, share intelligence with allies, and treat these groups as national security threats, not just crime rings. Fentanyl pushed the debate even further. Because tens of thousands of Americans die each year from fentanyl overdose, lawmakers urged Washington to treat fentanyl as a weapon of mass destruction, a legal term usually used for nerve gas or nuclear devices. Once leaders start talking about terror labels and weapons of mass destruction, calls for heavy firepower get louder. There are clips of cartel gunmen in armored trucks with belt-fed machine guns and rocket launchers, and drone shots of jungle labs and hilltop safe houses. Some politicians say the United States should hit those sites the way it hits enemy camps in a war zone, using bombs like the Massive Ordnance Air Blast Bomb and the Massive Ordnance Penetrator, huge weapons built to shatter wide surface targets or deep-hardened bunkers. The first is a massive airburst bomb that was dropped once on an Islamic State tunnel network in Afghanistan in 2017. The second is a 30,000-pound bunker buster designed for very deep reinforced targets. To people sick of massacres and overdoses, the idea of dropping one giant bomb on a cartel stronghold can sound simple and satisfying. Reality gets in the way. Mexico is a sovereign country with its own government, courts, and voters. Its leaders, from past presidents to the current one, have pushed back hard against talk of foreign troops or bombs on Mexican soil. They have said again and again that Mexico is not a colony and will not accept outside armies calling the shots. Even the idea of secret United States forces crossing the line without a clear invite sparks fierce public anger. Limited strikes against suspected cartel boats far out at sea, well away from any coast, already create diplomatic strain. The idea of dropping giant bombs on a lab hidden in the hills with families living in nearby towns raises nightmares of dead civilians, ruined villages, and a break in relations between the two countries that could set back every joint effort against crime. There is also a basic practical problem. Cartels do not stand in neat ranks on open ground the way old-style armies did. Their leaders move between apartments, ranches, nightclubs, and safe houses, often surrounded by civilians. Their money lives inside banks, front companies, and real estate files, not inside one clear headquarters. Their labs shift from one valley to another whenever pressure rises. You can drop a huge bomb on one site, but the network often bends and flows around the hit like water. That is why the people who work this fight day to day still put most of their effort into the slow tools: seizures at sea, long investigations into money laundering, quiet deals with foreign police units, and years-long court cases. Set against this wider picture, an outlaw motorcycle club, even a large and feared one, is small. A group like the Hells Angels may have a few thousand members worldwide and a deep reputation for violence in certain regions, especially when it comes to grudges, turf fights, or control of local drug markets. They matter in the story of how drugs move through certain cities and highways. They matter in the lives of people hurt or killed in their clashes with rivals, but they do not run fleets of semi-submarines across the Pacific, and they do not sit at the center of the command rooms in Florida, Colombia, or Mexico City. In the scale of this wider war, they are one more violent player in a crowded field, not the main force on either side. Thanks for watching. Now check out the videos popping up on screen for more unbelievable stories.